Alright, so in the last lecture we looked at Nozick's experience machine argument. And, one of the things the argument seemed to show was that truth has intrinsic value. If you would turn down being in the experience machine, and if you would pity people who are in the experience machine, you, Nozick thinks, probably have to say truth has intrinsic value. That's the most logical, the most natural explanation of why we would reject it if we would, and about what is bad about being in the experience machine, right? Truth has intrinsic value. That's what Nozick's argument seems to show. Remember, intrinsic value means valuable in and of itself, not just as a means to something else. Dieting, instrumental value means to other things, right? Pleasure, fun, things like that. Intrinsically valuable in and of itself, right? And again, the way we can draw the distinction, if it is instrumentally valuable, it makes perfect sense to ask you why you're doing it, what it's a means for. If it's intrinsically valuable, those questions don't seem to make as much sense, right? They don't make sense at all a lot of times. Why are you dieting? What do you want to get out of it? Makes perfect sense. Why do you want to have fun? Is a much weirder, I would even say nonsensical seeming question, right? Dieting, instrumental value, if it has any value at all. Fun seems to have intrinsic value, right? Good in and of itself. Well, so Nozick says believing the truth has intrinsic value, right? Go a little further, you might say that in the same way that pain has intrinsic disvalue, not just bad because it keeps you away from other stuff, bad in and of itself, believing falsehoods have intrinsic disvalue. Now, is Nozick right about this? Does believing the truth have intrinsic value? I think it does. But here's a follow-up question. And this is why I'm not so convinced that we should care that much whether we're living in a simulation or even whether we should spend that much effort to find out. It's also why I think, Neo or any sane person should take the blue pill. Well, the fact that truth has intrinsic value leaves open the question how much intrinsic value truth has. And there's another question here, which I think is even more important, and that is, do all truths have the same value? And I think our answer to the second question, this question of how much value truth has in general, I'm not sure there's an answer to it, because I think the second question, there's no good answer to how much value does truth have generally, because I think different truths have radically different values. Do all truths have the same value? My answer is obviously not. I mean, think of it this way, right? Some truths are completely trivial. They might not have any real value to you. Let me give you guys an example. My wife and I visited Memphis. It was for a family event, but we also had some spare time. So my wife wants to go to Graceland, right? I think it's just the thing you do in Memphis, right? She's not a huge Elvis fan. I'm not a huge Elvis fan. I wouldn't mock Elvis. Elvis's From Elvis and Memphis album, I think it's called. That one's really good. If you mock Elvis, go listen to that. That's actually a really solid album. But I'm also not obsessed with Elvis, neither is she, right? Well, so we take an Uber out to Graceland. Our Uber driver clearly is obsessed with Elvis. I guess he kind of makes a point of taking all as many of the rides going out to Graceland as he can. And he knows, and I'm sure, you know, still does, he knew then, still does, I'm sure, know all kinds of random facts about Elvis. But we greatly disappointed our Uber driver because we were not excited, or not as excited as he thinks we should be, to learn new fun facts about Elvis, right? He threw all these facts out to us, and rather than like, man, that's awesome, I know new things about Elvis now, we're like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Why? Random facts about Elvis Presley have very, very little value to me, right? Now, to our Uber driver, they have a lot of value apparently to me. I'm just like, oh, all right, yeah, it's cool to know, I guess. And just generally, I think all of us would set different values to different truths, right? Knowing the truth about whether the person you're marrying really loves you, that doesn't seem just instrumentally valuable, that seems intrinsically valuable, right? Knowing if you're really proud of some work you've done, knowing whether it's really good work or whether people are just telling you that seems very intrinsically valuable. Random Elvis factoids, though, maybe they have some intrinsic value. I don't know. But if they do, it's pretty low for me, right? Looking at my dog here as she sleeps, just great when you're trying to record lectures. She likes to follow us around, which is sweet. She also, when there's the least noise outside, goes crazy and starts barking, which is a problem when you record lectures, right? But, looking at the dog, there's a fact about exactly how many hairs are on the dog at this specific moment, right? Knowing that truth might have some value, very, very, very low, right? Knowing what Ronald Reagan's favorite flavor of jelly bean was, also for most of us, very, very low intrinsic value, if any. Just out of curiosity, when I used that random example, I couldn't avoid Googling it. Supposedly it was licorice, right? My point being, you probably don't think your life has been greatly enriched by knowing that Ronald Reagan liked licorice jelly beans, right? All right. So here is the question then. If different truths have different amounts of intrinsic value, some might have no intrinsic value at all, or if they do, it's very, very low. How valuable and important is it to know whether we are living in a simulation? And what would be wrong about it if we were? How important is it? Well, let's think a bit about the experience machine again. I want to say a little bit about how I actually think the experience machine differs from the matrix possibility and also the possibility that Bostrom gives us in ways that are, I think, pretty important. If you are in the experience machine, what are you wrong about? As Nozick sketches it, you are wrong about everything. Perhaps most importantly, you are wrong about how others feel about you and regard you. Your experience machine wife or husband doesn't really love you because he or she is not real. The adoring crowds that come to your concerts or your campaign events or when you get off the capsule after landing on Mars, they don't really adore and care about you because, again, they also aren't real, right? They don't exist. You are wrong about that. Well, the question I want to end with, and we'll pick this back up in the next lecture, what are you wrong about in Bostrom's simulation possibility? If we are in a simulation, as Bostrom thinks we probably are, I think we probably aren't, but he thinks we are, probably are. If we are in a simulation, what are we wrong about? If we were in the Matrix, what would we be wrong about? Are we wrong about the same important things we are in Nozick's experience machine are not? Are we wrong about as many things, and are the things we are wrong about as important if we are living in a simulation? Think about that, and that's the point I'll pick up on in the next lecture.